Welcome back, my friends. We are on the back page of our graphing functions lesson. This is our first lesson. In today's lesson, as far as actually graphing, we're going to focus on the linear and quadratic types. Okay, so I have one example of a linear function and I have one example of a quadratic function I want to go through with you before I set you loose to do some independent practice. All right, so here we go. We're going to create a table of values and graph each function. Hint, write down your work. What I'm going to tell you is the biggest problem I've seen with kids with graphing functions is not being able to correctly do the calculations. Okay, so write down your work and then also know what kind of shape you are expecting to get. Because if you know what kind of shape you're expecting to get and then your dots do not go in the right shape, that's your clue that you need to go back and fix your calculations. Okay, so our first function, f of x equals -3/5 x plus 1. And now this one should be pretty easy for you to know exactly where it goes because we have spent time graphing in slope-intercept form. All right, but we're going to practice this with the table, and then what I'll have you do after you finish the table and graph all the dots is take a look and see, is it what you thought it should be based on knowing what the equation should look like. Okay, first thing we're going to do before you even graph it, what shape should this be? All right, so when I look at it, okay, and remember the f of x, that's the same thing as saying just y. Okay, so over here on my axis, I do have a y. I could make that an f of x if I wanted to. All right, I see a negative sign, I see a fraction, but the x has no exponents on it. It has no absolute value. That's what tells me that this is going to be a linear function. Linear meaning it's going to make a line. So what that means is when I get all my dots, if I have any dots that aren't in the line like they're supposed to be, like little ducks in a row, I've made a huge mistake. All right, I'm going to put a piece of paper under here so that my pen goes better. All right, so remember the x value gets plugged in to the function and we're going to put it right here. All right, so first thing I need to do is figure out what's f of -10. So I'm going to write out my work. So f of -10 is equal to, and of course I have my -3/5, and I'm going to multiply that times -10 plus 1. Now you may want to put that over 1. Now if you need to use your calculator, keep in mind that the ABC button will help you do this calculation. I don't use a calculator. I'm going to talk you through how I do this, okay? So basically, when we multiply fractions, it's multiplying straight across and then down here. So when I look at this, I see -3 times -10 is positive 30. Positive 30 divided by 5 is 6. 6 plus 1 is going to give me 7. All right, so f of -10 is 7. We're going to do that same procedure all the way down. So the next one is f of -5. And I'm going to give you a little hint. The reason I picked these numbers is I want to get rid of the fractions. I don't want to have to graph fractions if I can avoid it. So I am choosing numbers that are multiples of 5 so that I can easily kill off the fractions and I have an easier graph. All right, so again, if I want to find f of -5, I'm going to put the -5 in place of the x. So I'm -3 over 5 times -5 over 1 plus 1. Again, you can use your calculator, but -3 times -5 is 15. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. Next one is f of 0. We're going to put the 0 in place of the x. So -3 over 5 times 0 plus 1. The 0 times anything is 0, so this just ends up being 1. F of positive 5 is equal to, now keep in mind the -3 over 5 is still negative for every single one of these. It doesn't matter that I'm plugging in a positive 5. My equation is still the same. -3 over 5 times 5 over 1 plus 1. Now, -3 times 5 is -15. -15 divided by 5 is -3. -3 plus 1 is -2. And then lastly, my last value, f of 10, is equal to, so I'm going to plug that in, -3 over 5 times 10 over 1, and then add 1. Negative 3 times 10 is negative 30. Negative 30 divided by 5 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick here. All right, we know that the table should give us the same pattern based upon the coefficient of the x. So the slope of our line is going to be negative 3 over 5. Okay, now notice my x values that I chose from negative 10 to negative 5, I'm going up in the positive 5 direction, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. That's my 5 here, which means my y's need to be going down 3. So let's see if I have the pattern right based on the slope. So 7 minus 3 is 4, minus 3 is 1, minus 3 is negative 2, minus 3 is negative 5. The pattern that happens to your table should always match the pattern based upon the slope that's listed here. All right, so now that we have these, remember these are all ordered pairs. So for example, this is really negative 10, comma 7. All right, go ahead and graph all those little dots. Pause the video if you need to, because I'm just going to keep talking and I don't want you to miss out. Okay, again, we said this is a linear function. So what that means is you must be able to put your ruler down one time and hit every single dot. Okay, if you have to curve this in any way or go back to get a point and come back down, you have made a mistake. All right, so put your ruler down. Grab a pencil and go ahead and draw your line. It should hit every one of those dots. All right, some bat-isms. Your graph must go off both ends of your graph into the white space. We have to remember to put arrows on both ends. And then we're going to label this graph with the function rule. All right, so we're going to say this is f of x equals negative 3/5 x plus 1. So extend your graph all the way into the white space. We're going to put arrows on both ends, and we're going to label that function rule, aka equation. All right, so these are requirements in this class. All right, so there's the first one. I'm going to maybe separate this out into 2 videos, so if you do need to rewatch one, you don't have to fast forward so much. So stop there, and the next video I'm going to talk about the quadratic equation. That one's a bit of a challenge, so definitely make sure you watch that if you're having to make up this lesson from home if you missed class or something.